Lee Jong-jae barely came to his senses, barely holding back a groan from the piercing pain. He barely opened his eyes and struggled to comprehend where he found himself. Right behind him, an unstable portal raged, threatening to engulf everything around it. The man in glasses only smiled guiltily, fully understanding the trap they had fallen into. Finding themselves in a scorched wasteland, they realized that there was no point in waiting for help any longer. Lee Jong-jae clutched his head, unable to contain the wave of despair that washed over him. But at that very moment, an ominous, blood-red clot of energy burst from his chest. From this vibrating darkness arose the majestic and eerie demoness Rosaria. Her overwhelming aura instantly paralyzed Lee Jong-jae, leaving him in a clinging fear. Rosaria towered over him, smiling predatorily and enjoying the boy's helplessness. Her grin revealed a greedy desire to completely subjugate his mind. However, the spatial vibrations began to subside, forcing the companion to distract the guy from the trance. The man in glasses froze in surprise, feeling a sharp change in the atmosphere. Lee Jong-jae, despite everything, pulled himself together and responded with a confident and bold grin. Meanwhile, the giant metropolis continued to live its usual, noisy life. In the association's modern complex, everything was already prepared for emergency measures. Lim Ayan walked down the steps confidently, maintaining complete composure. She adjusted her jacket with a slight movement, ready to join the fight at any moment. But unknown people in formal suits had already come out to meet her, mock applauding her appearance. And their leader, with a scar on his face, grinned ominously, making it clear that this conversation would not be easy. Lim Ayan instantly tenses, instinctively trying to feel for the weapon hidden under his jacket. But she quickly realizes that the forces are too unequal, and a simple walk turns into a deadly trap for her. The leader of the conspirators merely points his finger at her, as if she were cornered prey that could no longer escape. The girl looks around fearfully, hoping to find at least some escape route in the depths of this gloomy park. However, her pursuer only condescendingly folds his arms across his chest, reveling in his own superiority. At this moment, Lim Ayan realizes with horror that she has been driven into a completely dead end, from which there is no escape, and a triumphant grin spreads across the man's face, foreshadowing a quick and brutal reprisal. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, right in front of the frightened assistant, the terrifying silhouette of a mad warrior appears. Lee Jong-jae slowly turns around at the sound of heavy footsteps, feeling the air around him instantly turn icy. The young man freezes in place, unable to take his eyes off the terrifying monster in human form. A bloodthirsty fighter grins before him, his razor-sharp teeth making him shudder with primal fear. The next moment, the giant's body is enveloped in a furious pink aura, releasing colossal destructive power. With a wild roar, he takes off, rushing down the corridor like a hurricane, ready to sweep away anyone in his path. Madness finally takes over his mind, turning the warrior into the perfect killing machine. He remembers the taste of past victories, when he personally beat to death the strongest demons of the underworld. His fingertips begin to glow with concentrated magic, capable of grinding entire rocks into powder. Anticipating a quick victory, he raises his fist for a crushing blow aimed straight at the boy's head. But suddenly the sound of heels cuts through the space and someone's swift shadow rushes past the stunned guy. A brave ally delivers a vicious preemptive strike, sending the ferocious foe reeling back, and the seemingly invincible monster freezes for the first time in deep shock, realizing that he underestimated the fragile girl. As confusion gives way to panic, Lim Ayan tries to take firm control of the situation. At this moment, Lee Jong-jae takes a fighting stance, preparing to repel any unexpected threat. Tension in the corridor reaches its peak as the comrades assess the balance of forces in the face of the approaching storm. Next to her, Hazard watches the scene with predatory anticipation, like a predator sensing easy prey. Lee Jong-jae makes a sharp gesture with his hand, drawing everyone's attention to the impending danger. Lim Ayan watches him go with a worried look, clearly understanding the seriousness of the moment. Lee Jong-jae maintains a calm demeanor, but his figure exudes a hidden, deadly threat. Dark memories of the nightmares they experienced flare up as the shadows of the past threaten to engulf them once again. But Lim Ayan quickly pulls herself together, pushing aside her fear in the face of the impending chaos. Lee Jong-jae freezes in silent concentration, not taking his eyes off his opponent. Hazard touches his ally's shoulder reassuringly, but a sinister, anticipatory grin plays on his face. His grin widens, revealing the ruthless and bloodthirsty nature of this dangerous player. They look appraisingly at the enemy standing opposite them in the sunlit aisle. Hazard doesn't hide his grim satisfaction as he watches this tense game unfold. His predatory smile betrays a man who genuinely enjoys the smell of impending carnage. Lee Jong-jae's wide grin reveals his excitement and readiness to embark on a dangerous adventure. A cold light of ruthless passion flashes in Hazard's eyes. Two dangerous fighters come face to face, and the air between them literally sparkles with latent hostility. Lee Jong-jae looks at his opponent with a wild, mad gleam in his eyes, blurring the line between ally and madman. And in Hazard's eyes is reflected pure rage and a mad desire to crush the impudent upstart. The huge stadium was buzzing with anticipation, filled with thousands of spectators eager to see the main spectacle. Pushing his way through the roaring crowd, Lee Jong-jae immediately found himself surrounded by persistent reporters. The bright flashes of the cameras blinded the eyes, and the endless questions merged into one incessant, irritating noise. At that moment, the intrusive press seemed to him like a real natural disaster from which there was nowhere to hide. Journalists vied with each other to attract his attention, hoping to be the first to get the coveted exclusive. Amidst the general chaos, a young journalist was especially desperately rushing forward, ready to do anything for one good shot. Losing her balance in the crowd, her trembling hand reached forward, threatening to turn into an awkward fall. But someone's strong and confident hand grabbed her wrist right in the air, stopping her fall. Lee Jong-jae held the surprised girl back with a gentle grin, instantly diffusing the tense situation. His calm, confident gaze made the reporter forget about all her prepared questions. The girl's cheeks flushed a deep blush, and the entire world around her seemed to cease to exist. In the spotlight, this scene looked like a scene from a romantic film, capturing all eyes. Charmed by his sudden nobility, she stood rooted to the spot, unable to utter a word from embarrassment. However, the romantic illusion quickly dissipated when the guy easily let her go and hurried to hide from the bustle. Leaving the confused journalist behind under the gunfire of other people's flashes, Lee Jong-jae only chuckled contentedly at his own trick. Leaving the noisy crowd in the corridors, he headed towards the brightly lit exit to the arena. The huge stadium greeted him with a blinding sun and the incessant roar of the stands, eager for a great battle. At that moment, his gaze became extremely serious and focused. The time for jokes had finally come to an end. After all, right in front of him, shrouded in an ominous purple aura, a dangerous opponent was already waiting, Cody Wood, anticipating a quick reprisal. But Lee Jong-jae only grinned madly, strengthening his arms with stone armor and preparing to show off his full, crushing power. The arena separated the opponents with a barrier, but the tension between them was already ready to explode into the air. The stands were frozen in anticipation of a grand spectacle as the commentator prepared to announce the start of the fight. His frantic voice echoed throughout the stadium, officially marking the start of this fierce rivalry. Cody Wood was instantly on the move, revealing to the world his wild, animalistic grace and thirst for blood. The duel for the right to recruit began, and Lee Jong-jae rushed towards danger, knowing no fear. The very first clash of their fists generated a powerful shockwave that made the arena shake. Behind Lee Jong-jae, a colossal ghostly silhouette loomed, ablaze with a menacing otherworldly force. It was the King of Knights, a summoned spirit whose power was more than enough to crush an S-rank monster. Our hero was completely confident in his absolute protection and the unshakable strength of his trump card. However, his opponent did not even flinch in the face of such terrifying greatness. Cody Wood just chuckled condescendingly, assessing the obstacle in front of him as something insignificant. His face was distorted by a terrible, grinning grimace of a true predator who has sensed worthy prey. At that moment, Lee Jong-jae suddenly realized that he had made a fatal mistake by underestimating the enemy. A ghostly cheetah, made of pure, primal Cody Wood energy, rushed towards him. The boy barely had time to realize what was happening when the deadly whirlwind of the attack caught him off guard. But this was only the beginning. The enemy's fist was already filled with a destructive, blinding light. Wood's concentrated rage was ready to burst forth and erase anyone in its path. With the roar of a gigantic ghost bear, a crushing blow fell upon Lee Jong-jae, crushing his defense. Thrown back by a powerful explosion, the boy managed to summon shining golden chains at the last moment. With the last of his strength, he threw them forward, desperately trying to hamper the movements of this unstoppable monster. However, Cody Wood didn't even flinch, and his eyes flashed with an otherworldly purple flame. Enveloped in a seething dark aura, he merely bared his teeth fiercely, ready to tear apart any barriers. The golden chains didn't last even a second. The giant phantom he summoned instantly shattered them into pieces. Lee Jong-jae panicked as he realized that his last hope for salvation had been destroyed. Before the boy had time to come to his senses, a crushing blow fell upon him. Following the bull's fury, Cody summoned a new monster. A giant ghostly elephant rushed down. Lee Jong-jae froze in horror, realizing that it was impossible to dodge this attack. A monstrous explosion shook everything around, splitting the arena slabs into small pieces. When the dust settled a little, the silhouette of an approaching monster appeared through it. Cody Wood just chuckled indulgently, reveling in his absolute power. He slowly closed the distance, looking at his wounded opponent as easy prey. Breathing heavily and barely able to stand, Lee Jong-jae listened to mocking questions about how he was going to win. But in spite of everything, a stubborn, insolent smile suddenly appeared on the guy's bloody face. Cody continued to press forward, truly believing that his opponent was finally cornered. The thirst for blood completely consumed the warrior's mind, causing him to bare his fangs madly. Right above him, a new nightmare was woven, a gigantic prehistoric predator, ready to devour all living things. The stadium stands exploded with wild cries of delight at his frightening grandeur. A huge shadow covered the spectators, frozen with fear and admiration, and only Yu A-yeon in the stands behaved surprisingly calmly, gobbling up popcorn to the frightened cries of her neighbor. She just smiled coquettishly, sincerely glad that she had not missed this breathtaking spectacle. She watched the unfolding madness with mild interest, as if everything that was happening was just a funny game, while her neighbor literally choked with horror, seeing the ghostly silhouettes of ferocious animals behind his opponent. This invisible mental pressure was suffocating him, forcing him to clutch his collar convulsively in an attempt to take at least one breath. Trying to find support, he turned to Yu A-yeon in fear, wondering how she could remain so indifferent. But the girl only smiled conspiratorially and casually shoved another handful of popcorn into her mouth. At that moment, a real storm erupted in the arena, crushing gravity and painting the space in poisonous pink tones. Kim Tae-young just grinned excitedly, reveling in this insane pressure and thirst for battle. A deathly silence fell over the stands, and only Yu A-yeon continued to crunch on her snack with gusto. Her neighbor was completely speechless, horrified by the scale of the collision unfolding before his eyes. The reporters were so surprised they even forgot to press the buttons on their cameras, frozen with their mouths open. The commentator screamed madly into the microphone, his voice breaking from the indescribable shock. Surrounded by smoke, Cody Wood turned around in shock, unable to believe that his devastating attack had had absolutely no effect. Cold sweat trickled down his face as he realized the overwhelming force that stood before him. Kim Tae-hyun only smiled condescendingly at his opponent, whose pride had just been trampled into dust. Behind the scenes, chaos broke out, and the agitated staff began frantically calling their superiors. But the outcome of the fight had already been decided right before the eyes of thousands of breathless spectators. A disgruntled murmur swept through the stands. People refused to believe that their favorite could lose so easily. The crowd erupted in outrage, accusing the fighters of a fixed match and outright cheating. However, the winner didn't care about the shouts of others. He stood proudly in the middle of the arena under the crosslights of the spotlights. Looking calmly ahead, Kim Tae-hyun understood that this victory was only the beginning of his true triumph. The dust had not yet settled on the destroyed slabs of the arena, but the outcome of the duel was already predetermined. The most powerful adversary, whose pride seemed indestructible, now shuddered pitifully with impotent rage. The crushing blow that decided the fate of this confrontation in an instant was still fresh in the memory. The winner's face was stained with blood, but in his eyes burned the cold fire of true superiority. The icy order to obey sounded like a sentence that did not allow for any objections. Kwon Kang-hyuk's face, distorted with anger, betrayed his inability to accept the shameful defeat. Breathing heavily from humiliation, he felt the remnants of his control crumble to dust under his opponent's gaze. His bestial grin revealed sharp fangs. The thirst for revenge boiled within the defeated warrior with renewed vigor. The grand arena, shaking with the tension in the air, froze in anticipation of the inevitable denouement. The stands exploded with a storm of emotions. Some froze in mute shock, while others caught every detail with undisguised interest. Unwilling to admit defeat, Kwon Kang-hyuk struggled to his feet, clenching his fists to the limit. A deafening roar of rage erupted from his chest, shaking the air and foreshadowing the mad continuation of the battle. However, amidst the general panic and cries of horror in the stands, there remained those who openly enjoyed the spectacle. The charming Yue-young only smiled mysteriously, clearly pleased with such an unexpected and exciting turn of events. From her perch, she watched the drama unfold on the battlefield, anticipating an even greater show. Kim Tae-hyun, however, remained completely unperturbed, proving to everyone that his hidden trump cards were capable of crushing any favorite. Watching his triumph, Yue-yan was once again convinced of how unique and unpredictable this guy was. Her genuine joy and insane appetite only emphasized the absurdity of the fear that reigned around her. Suddenly, a heavy, confident step swept across the arena, causing the earth to shake again. Kim Tae-hyun turned to face the new challenge, ready to meet any danger head-on. The tension between the two opponents reached its peak, ready to explode into a new outburst of rage. But instead of delivering another blow, the wounded Kim Tae-hyun only confidently extended his hand to his opponent. This unexpected gesture of sincerity caused only dull irritation and bewilderment on the face of the stern giant. There was not a drop of fear on Kim Tae-hyun's face, only the mad excitement of a man who has looked into the very abyss. As if accepting this silent challenge, his opponent bared his teeth in a predatory, anticipatory smile. Their palms met in a strong, crushing handshake, signifying a new, unspoken agreement. The vast difference in strength and size no longer mattered in this silent duel of wills. A slight smile of superiority played across the young man's face, causing the air around them to become unnaturally cold. And in that brief moment, the experienced warrior suddenly felt a chilling sweat run down his back. An illusion of a primeval beast awoke behind Kim Tae-hyun, causing even the most steadfast person to shudder. Meanwhile, high above the noise of the metropolis, in the very heart of the association, a completely different drama was unfolding. One of the elite fighters stood before his stern leader, trying to hide the tremor in his voice as he reported. Ghosts of past battles, when humanity stood on the brink of destruction, flashed before the eyes of the association's head. The subordinate desperately tried to convey the seriousness of the impending threat, demanding immediate intervention. But in the spacious office, flooded with cold light, an oppressive silence reigned, interrupted only by heavy breathing. The seasoned veteran merely listened silently to the emotional arguments, not rushing to make rash decisions. Every word echoed with a heavy burden of responsibility, causing the air in the room to literally thicken. The calm, penetrating gaze of the leader's single eye read his subordinate like an open book. He knew all too well the price of hasty conclusions, and understood that behind every great crisis there is always someone's will. But the silence of their stern conversation was suddenly broken by an alarm signal, and an agitated Lim Ion appeared on the hologram with an urgent message. Her voice shook with tension as she reported a new, unexpected threat that had emerged at the very edge of the controlled area. After hearing the emergency message, the commander only frowned, realizing that the situation was completely getting out of control. Those present in the hall froze in heavy anticipation, realizing what a colossal responsibility fell on their shoulders. After all, behind this chaos, the silhouette of a puppeteer, eager to plunge the world into eternal darkness, was clearly visible. Meanwhile, in the very heart of the outpost, a huge spatial portal had already opened, ready to swallow up the defenders. One of the experienced fighters began to count down, checking the readiness of each soldier in the line. The young recruits, hiding their fear behind feigned severity, checked their equipment for the last time. Even veterans who had fought in dozens of deadly battles could not hide their anxiety in the face of the unknown. But among them there were those who longed for this battle more than anything else, anticipating the coming carnage. Kim Tae-young calmly stepped forward, completing the allied count and instilling confidence in the hearts of his comrades. However, there was no time for unnecessary conversation when a deafening roar came from the depths of the rift. The gates shone with a blinding light, behind which hid the primal fury of ancient monsters, and this call was echoed by a bloodthirsty grin on the faces of those for whom battle was the only meaning of life. A squad of the finest spiders moved straight into the shining abyss, ready to take the inevitable blow. They were instantly transported into the dark halls of an ancient labyrinth, where the air literally sparkled with an excess of alien magic. Before the warriors had time to take up defensive positions, the walls of the temple shook from the first devastating explosion. Hordes of ferocious minotaurs poured through the narrow corridors, engaging in a fierce and bloody battle. Without wasting a second, Kim Tae-hyung soared into the air, his deadly weapon thrust forward. There was no shadow of doubt in his eyes, only a cold determination to see this through to the end. A lightning-fast stroke of the blade cut through the gloom, heralding the beginning of a new, merciless war for survival. The monster's ferocious onslaught was stopped in an instant, leaving it no chance. The defeated monster crumbled into dark dust at the feet of the young man, whose figure exuded unshakable calm. But Kim Tae-young's sensitive hearing detected the approach of a new, even more impressive force. Cody Wood emerged from the dust and chaos of battle, casually holding the trophy, the head of the fallen Minotaur leader in his hand. On his face there was a predatory, insane grin of a man who was genuinely enjoying the madness of this carnage. Kim Tae-young only smiled slightly, putting away his weapon, ready to listen to his unexpected ally. The blade of his sword, which just a second ago had been glowing with a deadly gleam, now rested peacefully in his hand. As they moved through the battle raging around them, they realized that the true clearing of the dungeon was only just beginning. Kim Tae-young kept his cool as he assessed the magnitude of the challenge ahead. At that moment, an excited Lim Aeon hurried towards them, eager to share important data from her tablet. She began to talk enthusiastically about the combat capabilities of the vanguard units holding back the enemy onslaught, and about the mysterious summoners whose ghostly magic illuminated the darkest corners of this cursed place. The girl actively gesticulated, trying to convey to the hunters every detail of the tactical plan. Kim Tae-young listened to her attentively, realizing how high the stakes were in this foray. Cody Wood merely watched them with condescension, confident in the superiority of his brute strength. After all, even the most powerful creatures turned to ash upon contact, leaving behind only valuable trophies. The experienced fighter encouraged the newcomers, confident that with such a team they would not be afraid of any boss. Kim Tae-young only smiled awkwardly in response to his overly self-confident speech. But the glint in Cody Wood's eyes suggested he was hungry for an even greater challenge. Gathering their courage, the squad moved on, guided by the dim light of the lantern towards the unknown depths of the abyss. A metal staircase led upward to a mysterious hatch, inscribed with crimson runes of an ancient curse. As soon as the conductor opened the heavy lid, a flock of disturbed bats rushed out with a shrill squeal. Leaving behind the narrow passage, the detachment, led by their mysterious guide, stepped into the spacious, gloomy halls of the underground complex. The man with the lantern remained deathly silent, hiding his face behind the brim of his worn hat. But soon a dim beam of light snatched from the darkness the silhouette of the one who was waiting for them in the very heart of this dungeon. The mighty Minotaur, an ancient guardian whose heavy breathing shook the damp air, appeared before the uninvited guests. The appearance of the monster made the companions freeze, assessing the crushing power of their new enemy. The monster's stony composure only confirmed that he was accustomed to mercilessly dealing with anyone who dared to disturb his peace. However, Cody Wood didn't feel any fear. Instead, a crazy, anticipatory, grinning grin played across his face. As rear support rushed to prepare the necessary equipment, Cody could no longer contain his impatience. Lee Jong-jae looked at the rapidly unfolding events with alarm, realizing that the mad battle had already begun. The young man's gaze became extremely focused because any mistake in his confrontation could be fatal. And the next moment, Cody Wood's furious battle cry broke the oppressive silence of the dungeon. An incredibly powerful blow fell directly on the monster's head, completely severing its colossal horn. Riding the fallen giant, Cody unleashed all the destructive energy that had been dormant within his body. Behind him, the excited cries of surprised soldiers were heard, and Lee Jong-jae only smiled with relief and calm. Cody Wood breathed heavily, reveling in the moment of absolute triumph, feeling his wild strength grow. The last spark of life faded from the eyes of the ancient guardian, admitting his defeat before superior will. Standing on the shoulders of the fallen giant, the warrior looked around at the path that opened up before them. A blinding flash of pure energy marked the end of this battle, opening the way to new, even deeper mysteries. But even Cody Wood couldn't have foreseen the challenge fate had in store for them this time. The ground literally disappeared from under their feet as an ancient monster awakened from the depths. A huge, bony giant rose from the dust, causing the very fortress to tremble. Panic instantly engulfed the ranks of the allies, who realized the hopelessness of their situation. However, amidst this chaos, there remained those whose icy calm could not be shaken by any threat. The elements seemed to go mad, unleashing a merciless ice storm on the survivors. The streams of raging water carried them deeper and deeper, testing their strength every moment, and ahead, the mouth of a volcano was already opening up, breathing primordial flame and death. And only Kim Tae-hyung kept his cool, illuminating this darkness with his confident smile. A new test took their squad under the dark shadow of a primeval, mysterious forest. Every step was difficult, and the feeling of impending danger became almost tangible. The surrounding thicket seemed to be closing in on them, cutting off any escape routes. The sudden awareness of an alien presence paralyzed even the most experienced fighters with fear. At the same time, in the silence of the distant monastery, the pages of an ancient tome slowly opened. Every moment that turned brought the denouement of the great game closer, where mortals were only pawns. The mysterious masked gentleman listened silently to his subordinate's urgent report. Every word of the messenger was imbued with awe before the absolute power of this man. After all, just one movement of his hand could change the course of history in the blink of an eye. The shadow of Yue Yan already looms over the heroes, promising a quick clash with an enemy of an entirely different scale. And with the dull thud of a book closing, the fate of this world was finally decided. Meanwhile, in the deep shadows, those who consider themselves the puppeteers of this era continued to weave their invisible threads. Another squad of unsuspecting mercenaries stepped into the canopy of the ancient forest, hoping for an easy walk. The newcomers thought that the presence of an experienced B-rank fighter guaranteed them absolute safety in this wilderness. However, every step they took only brought them closer to the inevitable and crushing end. Before anyone could react, Kim Tae-hyung launched a swift and merciless blow at their leader. The appearance of this young man instantly destroyed all the usual rules of the game, causing the survivors to freeze in stupor. The squad leader looked at the stranger in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what had happened. Sinister rumors of mad monsters in human form, leaving only ashes in their wake, flashed through his mind. Memories of the higher-ups who had sent them on this mission now seemed like a distant and meaningless past. Only the cold sweat and the fear rising in their throats reminded them of the harsh reality in which they found themselves. The sudden realization of his own helplessness caused the man to scream in impotent rage. Before his eyes, the strongest fighter of the group was defeated with a single move, without even having time to draw his weapon. The remaining soldiers retreated back in horror, not believing their own eyes at the sight of their fallen comrade. Panic instantly swept through the ranks of those who, just a moment ago, considered themselves hunters. But Kim Tae-hyung only smiled disarmingly, assuring that he had destroyed the real enemy. Blinded by anger, the commander did not listen to the stranger and raised his pistol, relying on his trusty lead. He let out a mad scream and pulled the trigger, hoping to end the life of this monster. But for Kim Tae-hyung, the flying projectiles were just a slow dance, which he dodged with incredible ease. Random gunfire filled the forest thicket, but not a single shot reached its target. And while the shots rang out, happy moments from the past with the one whose life he so desperately and hopelessly tried to protect flashed through the shooter's memory. Anger boils in the blood, forcing you to clench your teeth until they grind. A desperate cry is drowned out in the thick of battle when superior force overtakes its victim. But instead of panic, only wild, unbridled persistence can be seen on his face. A powerful blow falls on the target, instantly knocking all confidence out of the enemy. The body falls limply to the ground with the sound of a deafening impact. The enraged opponent with blood on her face is ready to respond with all the cruelty. At this critical moment, the situation escalates to the limit, revealing the true face of the threat. The confident smile on Kim Tae-hyung's face exudes an eerie calm. A clash of titanic power shakes the very earth, raising clouds of stone chips. The stunned fighters barely have time to comprehend the scale of the destruction. Go Tae-wook's eyes show genuine shock at the sudden attack. The destructive wave leaves behind only a gaping crater. An uninvited guest appears from the shadows of the dense thickets, breaking the silence. Kim Tae-hyung appears on the battlefield, clutching a formidable weapon in his hands. His opponent displays disdain, brushing off his threats with ease. She casually adjusts her hair, enjoying the moment of her superiority. Blood spits out through teeth, but the fighting spirit only increases. A dangerous rival slowly emerges from the shadows of the trees, anticipating the outcome. She looks around the battlefield triumphantly, radiating an aura of absolute dominance. Kim Tae-hyung turns around with a sly grin, calming his tense allies. Yoshikawa Surara looks around warily in the thick of the forest, sensing the approach of an inevitable confrontation. A wild, primordial force boils inside her, causing her fingers to clench convulsively. Deadly claws emit an ominous purple glow, ready to tear apart anyone in their path. With a mad laugh, she rushes forward with her allies, determined to finish off the enemy in one fell swoop. But Kim Tae-hyung meets this furious attack with chilling calm, barely dodging the deadly blades. The fighters surrounding him try to clamp the guy in a vice, bringing down all their crushing force on him. However, every move they make is predetermined. One of the attackers crashes into the wall with force, leaving deep cracks. Tae-hyung makes a swift maneuver, and the crushing blow shakes the very ground beneath their feet. Shining golden chains materialize out of nowhere, cutting through the air with a soft whistle. Before the opponents can react, the ghostly bonds tighten around their necks. With one sharp movement, Kim Tae-hyung leaps into the air, throwing his chained enemies around like ragdolls. At this moment, Surara rushes into battle again, concentrating all his remaining energy in his claws. Tae-hyung only turns his head slightly, anticipating the continuation of this deadly game. Their weapons collide with a clang, creating sparks and a powerful blast wave. A look of genuine horror appears on the girl's face. She cannot believe what is happening. Kim Tae-hyung's look of superiority makes her realize the depth of her fatal mistake. But it's too late to retreat, and Surara calls upon the true embodiment of his inner beast. A barely noticeable smirk plays on the boy's lips, even as a drop of blood rolls down his cheek. With incredible grace, he dodges the barrage of purple blades, as if dancing through the chaos. Exhausted and cornered, the warrior continues to strike desperate blows, gradually losing hope of victory. Her eyes widen in indescribable horror as she realizes the inevitability of her fate. Each subsequent blow falls upon her with crushing force, carrying away the last crumbs of resistance. Her opponent only smiles mockingly, fueled by the ominous power of the ghostly entity hovering behind him. Realizing that the forces are unequal, she rushes away through the dense thickets, desperately trying to save her life. Fear drives her forward, making her run without looking back until her lungs burst from lack of air. But a destructive wave overtakes her, shaking the earth and turning trees into splinters. He revels in his superiority, knowing that the victim will never escape his deadly pursuit, and no matter how fast she runs, every step becomes more and more difficult for her. She feels the icy breath of imminent death touching the very back of her head. A new explosion shakes the forest, finally cutting off any escape routes. The rising whirlwind lifts fallen leaves into the air, hiding the battlefield in a veil of dust. The remnants of her hope crumble along with the centuries-old branches of the trees. At this time, Lee Jong-jae, guided only by a premonition of trouble, carefully makes his way through the thicket. Anxiety builds in his chest as he catches echoes of the recent battle, and what opens up to his gaze in the clearing makes his heart skip a beat. Captured and bound with heavy chains, the girl resists furiously, shouting curses in the enemy's face. However, her cry of impotent rage is rudely interrupted by a merciless tug on her hair. Hazard leans over her, reveling in her helplessness and weakness. Rosaria materializes behind him, her ominous presence only confirming that there is no mercy to be expected. And at that moment, the unfortunate captive finally realizes into whose clutches she has fallen. Her eyes widen in indescribable horror as the last shreds of hope fade away into the abyss. From her trembling lips comes only a quiet, barely audible whisper of despair, signifying the inevitable end. And even the innocent white flowers around are instantly stained with crimson splashes of someone else's blood. At that moment, Lim Yung freezes, feeling the chilling hurricane of someone else's rage rushing right next to her. The merciless blade, washed in fresh blood, silently carries out its bloody harvest. Cody Wood, consumed by chaos, mercilessly ends the life of yet another fool who dares to stand in his way. Meanwhile, deep in the ominous forest, other pursuers come across another victim, bound hand and foot. The unfortunate woman lies unconscious on the damp ground, unaware of the threat hanging over her. Lee Jong-jae frowned as he peered into the depths of the forest, feeling anxiety grip his heart like an icy vice. The darkness around him thickens, giving birth to the eerie silhouettes of monsters ready to tear apart any disturber of the peace. His partner urges him on, assuring him that there is no more time to waste and that they need to move on as quickly as possible. They delve into the unknown thicket, where every rustle seems like a harbinger of imminent disaster. Lee Jong-jae's companion barely holds back his growing panic, realizing how dangerous this path is. But the young man himself remains silent, trying to unravel the true motives of those who lured them into this trap. Step by step, overcoming their fear, they move through the dense thickets. And suddenly, as if out of nowhere, a mysterious door materializes in front of them, leading into absolute emptiness. Beyond its threshold, primordial elements rage, breaking all the laws of familiar reality. Shocked by what he saw, his partner freezes in fear as Lee Jong-jae takes a decisive step into the unknown. There is a genuine fear in his eyes of the madness that is about to break out. All doubts about Kim Tae-hyung's actions finally dissipate, giving way to the realization there is no turning back. Kim Tae-hyung understands that the burden of responsibility now rests solely on his shoulders, and it is too late to retreat. His comrade, depressed by the bitter truth, refuses to believe in the inevitable until the very end. But the fear and the approaching despair in his eyes betray a bitter awareness of the harsh reality. Trying to reach his friend's mind, Tae-hyung leaves one last warning before stepping into the unknown. Now, speed is everything. They simply don't have time for long deliberations. A swift swing of the blade cuts through the stones with ease, marking the beginning of a merciless massacre. A furious clash erupts on the battlefield, where every wrong step can cost lives. The enemies advance in a dense formation, ready to crush anyone who stands in their way. Their heavy steps sound monotonous and ominous, a harbinger of imminent reprisal. An injured Cody Wood struggles to contain the onslaught, realizing that the situation is getting out of control. The killer, with a mad grin, already anticipates an easy victory, raising his bloody weapon over his new victim. In the midst of this madness, a defenseless girl runs into the battlefield in panic. Behind her, they are already raising a deadly blade, showing no mercy to the accidental witness. Seeing mortal danger, Cody Wood freezes for a moment in fear for her life. Without a second's hesitation, he rushes forward and takes a crushing blow with his back. The sharp steel cuts deep into his flesh, causing shock and a cry of despair from the one he had just saved. But this does not stop the ruthless pursuers. They are ready to deliver the next decisive blow to the weakened target. A furious thirst for blood drives the attackers forward, blinding them and depriving them of any compassion. With all his strength, pushing the girl to safety, the wounded warrior is left alone with death. At that moment, the beast that had been dormant inside Cody Wood finally awakens, and its eyes flash with an ominous purple flame of primal rage. With a wild, deafening roar, he unleashes years of pent-up dark energy. A gigantic purple phantom monster soars into the sky, crushing everything in its path. Lim A-young watches in silent horror as the ground disappears from under their feet. Ignoring his wounds, Cody rushes into the very center of the chaos, shielding the girl. She desperately reaches out to him, trying to stop this unbridled self-sacrifice. But pure rage finally clouds his mind, turning every movement into a deadly lunge. The girl freezes, realizing that in this flame, everything human that remained in him is burning. Meanwhile, a ring of flame and superior enemy forces closes around them. The dangerous opponent in the hat only grins coldly, spinning his artifact on a chain. Inside the sealed lantern, an ominous skull glows, emitting hellish heat. A giant fiery projection materializes over the battlefield, ready to incinerate all living things. The enemy leader has no doubt in his own victory, clutching the chain in a strong fist. Surrounded on all sides, Cody and Lim Eyoung find themselves at the epicenter of a flaming trap. However, breathing heavily and barely able to stand, Cody only clenches his purple claws tighter. The mercenary looks down on his wounded opponent, considering the outcome of the battle a foregone conclusion. He waits for the moment when the broken warrior falls to his knees before him, but instead of a plea for mercy, a terrible predatory grin spreads across Cody's bloody face. This crazy look instantly breaks through the enemy's confidence. Without a moment's hesitation, Cody Wood stands as a solid wall between the enemies and the girl. And the enemy commander realizes with horror that what stands before him is not a man at all, but a real devil. Fear paralyzes the enemy to the very depths of his soul as he peers into this inhuman darkness. He tries to drown out his own horror with screams, not understanding how this monster is still standing on its feet. But Cody Wood only grinned grimly, radiating a chilling confidence in his victory. The enemy stood frozen in shock, amazed that his attack had not caused the slightest harm to his opponent. However, even Cody's companion could not stand it, and began to express emotional indignation at his carelessness. In her opinion, all this deadly fuss arose only because of his habit of acting decisively. But the next moment, the red-hot chains tightened with a deafening clang. Instincts made Cody react instantly and again shield the girl from new danger. A huge flaming skull came crashing down on them, burning everything in its path. The enemy commander was already triumphant, sincerely believing that his insidious plan had finally worked. He cursed with glee, anticipating the death of his opponents in a sea of fire. However, through the roaring flames, Cody's firm and unwavering voice rang out again. His gaze flared with an ominous purple light, releasing the true, long-dormant power. From the clouds of darkness and flame, a gigantic dragon emerged, embodying pure chaos. With a crushing lunge, Cody literally crushed the enemy attack, leaving his opponent no chance. Choking on his own blood, the attacker realized too late the scale of the disaster. Having transformed into a true demon, Cody looked at his fallen enemies with a contemptuous grin. Meanwhile, in a completely different place, the shocked companions were still trying to figure out what was happening. And under the vaults of the gloomy ancient castle, alarming blood-red symbols were already flashing. And step by step, the heroes came closer to solving the mystery hidden in these dark chambers. Lee Jung-jae's sudden cry causes the dark vaults of the dungeon to shake as the illusion of safety is finally shattered. But Cody Wood just silently walks forward, leaving behind all the doubts and fears of his companions. The realization of an impending catastrophe washes over the young man like an icy wave, causing him to freeze in a daze. A horrifying picture opens before them. The battlefield is strewn with fallen bodies, and the former might of the detachment is ground to dust. One of the strongest avant-garde artists lies lifeless, his face covered in blood, his breath barely flickering in his chest. Realizing that the enemy is superior to them in everything, the survivors rush away in panic, saving their own lives. They make a desperate leap into the shining portal, leaving this entire nightmare behind. Silence falls over the ruined arena, where only wounded defenders remain among the ruins and petals. The unexpected return of the fugitives makes Cody Wood look up in amazement, not believing his own sight, and somewhere in the heights, in a spatial rift, mysterious doors silently hover, leading to other worlds. Lee Jung-jae steps forward to meet the weary leader, ready to face the consequences of their choice. The shameful moments when fear overcame duty and forced them to flee, abandoning their comrades, are still fresh in their memory. He silently looks at the wounded warrior, trying to discern in his eyes at least a shadow of his former confidence. Cody Wood takes that look with his head held high, despite the severity of his injuries. The familiar, barely noticeable predatory grin appears on his face again, hiding the deep bitterness of defeat. He admits that they encountered an unprecedented force, but the true master of these depths never showed his face. Closing his eyes, the wounded fighter reluctantly admits that their unit has suffered a crushing blow. But in his stern gaze there still burns a stubborn unwillingness to admit his final defeat. Lee Jung-jae merely coldly remarks that this harsh lesson should teach them to be more careful in the future. And while Cody Wood, in a rage, tries to say everything he thinks about this insolence, the young man only calmly leaves, leaving his allies to cope with their wounded pride. However, the moment of calm turns out to be extremely deceptive. The squad decides not to tempt fate, planning to gather their people and leave this dangerous place as quickly as possible. But a sudden feeling of anxiety makes him stop abruptly. The others do not yet have time to understand what exactly attracted his attention and made him wary. The air around is taut, like a string about to break. He stands frozen, his horror growing as he realizes what they are about to face. The space around begins to distort, plunging everything into an ominous tension. The ancient magic of the labyrinth awakens, revealing the face of a true nightmare. Numbness paralyzes their movements as a crushing aura envelops the guild. Cold sweat breaks out on the forehead, and the instinct for self-preservation screams about a mortal threat. Following him, the realization of the catastrophe reaches the rest of the group. Even the most experienced fighters are unable to hide the approaching panic. Events are taking the worst possible turn. A colossal monster, engulfed in crushing energy, materializes from a rift in reality. The master of the labyrinth himself rises before them, his burning eyes promising no mercy. Screams of horror are drowned out by a ferocious roar that shakes the vaults of the dungeon. The monstrous guardian grips his weapon tighter, ready to crush the intruders into dust. With one devastating blow, he unleashes the full force of his fury on the group, sending them flying in all directions. The shockwave knocks you off your feet, turning your attempt to escape into a desperate fight for survival. And while chaos covers everything around, all they can do is accept this unequal fight. Lee Jung-jae rushes forward, screaming desperately to get everyone's attention. Cody Wood unleashes his true power, enveloping his hands in a deadly purple aura. At the same time, his comrades are preparing for a clash, bristling with formidable force. They take off in unison, initiating a swift and merciless attack. At the most critical moment, the allies find themselves caught in the epicenter of destruction, trying to dodge flying debris. Cody Wood coordinates his teammates' actions, leading them to a hail of falling rocks. A gigantic colossus towers over the battlefield, emitting a blinding, punishing radiance. Each fighter strives to deliver a preemptive strike, cutting through the very fabric of space. Cody Wood defies gravity, leaving a trail of destruction and sparks in his wake. The danger is so close that the air literally crackles with electric tension. In the whirlwind of battle, Lee Jung-jae and Cody Wood push themselves to the limits of human ability. The source of monstrous energy flares up with renewed vigor, blinding opponents. A powerful pulse of energy pierces space, scattering everything in its path. An ominous red fire ignites inside the giant monster. The monster lets out a deafening roar that makes your blood run cold. The earth trembles under a new wave of horror, causing the defenders to freeze in amazement. Cody Wood is horrified to realize the true scale of the threat when Tao King himself stands before them. Mortal horror paralyzes movements, turning every second into eternity. Monstrous creatures of darkness block the way, leaving no room for retreat. The shockwave knocks you off your feet, turning your attempt to escape into a desperate fight for survival. Numb with terror in the face of imminent death, the survivors can only watch helplessly as the end approaches. But at the most critical moment, those for whom mortal risk is a common occurrence come to the rescue. The enemy lurking in the darkness reveals its true, terrifying form as an ancient monster. The onslaught of the horde of monsters seems unstoppable, and two warriors rush to intercept this avalanche of death. Enormous bony paws reach out to defenseless people, ready to crush them in the blink of an eye. Surrounded by superior enemy forces, the allies find themselves in a deadly trap with no escape. In a desperate attempt to protect his companion, the guy makes a last, almost hopeless shot, but the air trembles with the concentration of colossal destructive energy, ready to burst out. A powerful blow, enveloped in furious purple flame, literally crushes attacking creatures into dust. The rescue cannot believe their eyes, stunned by the sudden appearance of such a powerful force. Without wasting a second, the dark-haired hunter releases his shining chains, instantly restricting the monster's movements. Deadly shackles instantly tighten around the monster's necks, depriving them of any chance of resistance. With a furious battle cry, the warrior rushes forward, ready to personally finish what he started. Beside him, Cody Wood unleashes his inner demonic essence, concentrating his flames for a devastating attack. In a furious leap, he unleashes the full force of his wrath on the panic-stricken giants. An all-consuming blast of purifying fire illuminates the battlefield, reducing the flesh of monsters to ash. The dust settles, and two unrivaled masters of war stand before the rescued in all their glory. A smile of anticipation plays across Cody Wood's face. For him, this battle was just a light warm-up. However, a moment of calm gives way to an anxious premonition, because the instincts of seasoned warriors never lie. From the raging fire, as if from the very inferno, new, even more ferocious creatures of the abyss rise. Terrifying minotaurs with eyes glowing with scarlet fire emerge from the flames, ready to tear apart anyone in their path. Their furious, deafening roar shakes the vaults, foreshadowing a quick and inevitable reprisal. But Lee Jung-jae and his loyal ally are not about to back down so easily in the face of mortal danger. The next moment, the arena explodes from a collision of unprecedented force. The battle rages on with new, merciless force. Having unleashed all his inner energy, the furious fighter rushes into the thick of his enemies, crushing everything in his path. Each of his crushing blows tears apart the flesh of the monsters, causing them to shudder with unbridled power. Hellfire and pure power literally burn the monsters from the inside, leaving them no chance of salvation. However, the thirst for victory in the warrior's eyes does not fade, but only flares up more strongly with every second of this madness. Ahead of them lies an entire army of monsters, led by a gigantic leader soaring in the sky. This mighty monster looks with cold contempt upon the madmen who dare to challenge his invincible army. Wounded but not broken, the hero only grits his teeth tighter, ready to stand until the very end. Meanwhile, on the streets, ordinary people are desperately trying to save themselves while defenders cover their retreating ranks. Lee Jung-jae delivers a swift and precise strike from above, seeking to ease the burden on his comrades. Every moment of this confrontation requires an extreme strain of all physical and spiritual forces. Over time, dry reports on paper can hardly convey all the horror and chaos that took place on the battlefield. The old commander carefully studies the reports, fully aware of the exorbitant price he had to pay. In the silence of the office, difficult questions about the nature of the enemy are asked, the answers to which are hidden behind a veil of secrecy. For somewhere out there in the shadows of past battles, Cody Wood lurks, shrouded in his ominous purple aura. Memories of his crushing and chaotic power still make the scars on the commander's body ache with pain. And this intense, heavy gaze is directed towards the future, where a new, even more terrible war can no longer be prevented. In the silence of the office, under the heavy gaze of his interlocutor, this man seems to be the embodiment of a hidden threat. Cody Wood leans back in his chair, his whole demeanor projecting absolute superiority over the situation. His face is distorted by a frightening, predatory grin, revealing a mad inner fire. A fire that had once raged on the battlefields, washing his body with the blood of his enemies. Then, in the midst of a blazing hell, he alone stood against the superior forces of bloodthirsty monsters. Enormous minotaurs destroyed everything around them, leaving no chance for the survivors to escape. The comrades could only flee in panic, saving their lives from imminent death. But it was in this moment of desperation that Cody Wood decided to unleash his true, dormant power. A dark, chaotic aura enveloped his body, crowning his head with ominous horns of pure energy. The powerful explosion of unleashed rage made even the most staunch allies shudder. The berserker's furious roar echoed across the battlefield, causing those watching to freeze in primal fear. But even his crushing power was not enough to hold back the onslaught of madness alone. At the most critical moment, Lee Jongjae came to the rescue, ready to risk everything to save his comrade. This unexpected intervention left Cody momentarily stunned. The battle flared up with renewed vigor, turning the surroundings into a complete chaos of flame and dust. Working shoulder to shoulder, the warriors rushed forward, cutting their way through the dense ranks of monsters. But the leader of the monsters was already preparing his crushing response, raising his shining staff to the sky. The mysterious artifact flashed with a blinding light, concentrating colossal magical energy. The glow cut through the darkness, once again leveling the playing field in this merciless, deadly battle. And the enraged horde of minotaurs rushed into battle with renewed fury, ready to trample anyone in their path. The air around Cody Wood heats up to the limit, filling with dark, destructive energy. An explosion of colossal power tears through space, scattering opponents in all directions under the booming roar of flames. The monstrous minotaur bristles, ready to repel any threat, but its animal instinct already senses mortal danger. Every moment of delay is like death, and the tension in the epicenter of the battle reaches a critical point. But Kim Tae-young has no intention of retreating, soaring above the battlefield in a whirlwind of flames and sparks. His will is embodied in a giant phantom, whose terrifying appearance inspires primal terror. Cody Wood, grinning like a beast, accepts the challenge, giving himself over completely to the madness of the fight. Lee Jongjae cries out his comrade's name with bated breath, realizing the riskiness of their undertaking. A synchronized blow of monstrous force falls upon the enemies, crushing the very reality around them. Blinding flashes of lightning pierce the ranks of enemies, leaving only a scorched wasteland in their wake. Energy discharges strike without fail, turning armored monsters into a pile of smoking debris. The protective barriers are cracking at the seams under the onslaught of indescribable power, threatening to collapse at any second. The deadly scythe cuts through the darkness, falling upon the main giant in a crushing cascade. Sparks fly in all directions as the allies charge full speed into the dense ranks of monsters. Cody Wood grits his teeth, frantically trying to think of what other card they could play against this horde. The portal's flash opens a path of retreat, illuminating the wounded faces of the fighters with cold light. The furious roar of the monsters shakes the vaults of the dungeon as they launch a counterattack. A swift dash forward allows you to outpace enemy fangs by a fraction of a second. Cody Wood casts a predatory gaze across the battlefield, feeling the adrenaline rushing through his eyes. Lee Jongjae looks back at him with a tense gaze, realizing that they no longer have the room for error. Those around can only watch in horror as the air around them literally begins to melt from the monstrous pressure. A legion of terrible creatures rushes straight towards them like an unstoppable avalanche, eager to tear apart all living things in their path. But a giant bone guard rises to meet them, unleashing all its crushing power on the front ranks of the monsters. The blows of his heavy weapons crush the skulls of the monsters, leaving them no chance of salvation. The battlefield turns into a living hell, where ancient magic clashes with fangs in a mad dance of death. Lee Jongjae cries out in surprise as another shockwave nearly knocks him off his feet. At that moment, Cody Wood, overcome by primal rage, unleashes his dark essence and throws himself into the thick of the battle. The sky splits from a blinding flash of primordial energy, consuming everything around. As the smoke begins to clear, the fallen giants fall backwards, littering the ground with their bodies. Powerful echoes of the explosions continue to shake the already tormented earth, raising clouds of dust. Lee Jongjae falls onto a mountain of lifeless skulls, breathing heavily, trying to comprehend whether he survived this nightmare. His gaze darts from side to side, blinded by fear for the outcome of this suicidal battle. But what he sees right in front of him makes his heart clench with rising panic. Streams of scarlet blood flow from the body of his faithful comrade, indicating critical wounds. The realization of the harsh reality hits Lee Jongjae's mind harder than any enemy blade. However, Cody Wood only grins furiously, refusing to admit defeat even on the brink of death. Time seems to stand still as the outline of a new, far more deadly threat emerges through the veil of dust. Wounded, exhausted, but not broken, the two comrades stand shoulder to shoulder again on top of the ominous mountain of bones. A gigantic demon leader looms before them, ready to personally crush their feeble hope. But Cody Wood clenches his fist again, shrouded in ominous purple flame, ready to fight to the very end. A deafening cry is heard, filled with pain and desperate determination to break through this barrier. But the next crushing blow from the monster shakes the earth, spreading out in a destructive wave. A powerful explosion literally blows away the defenders, causing them to choke on dust in their own helplessness. The giant ruler only watches their frantic attempts to survive with a contemptuous grin. Wounded allies fall straight onto mountains of withered skulls, barely holding on to their fading consciousness. Every movement is achieved with inhuman effort, and there is a catastrophic lack of air in the chest. A terrifying realization hits them. They gave everything they had, but still couldn't inflict any real damage on the enemy, and the giant is already rising into the air, ready to finally crush the remnants of their resistance. And across the battlefield a cry echoes again, in which rage and fear of the inevitable are intertwined. Knowing that the next miss will be the last makes the heart beat at its limit. A brutal attack crashes down, turning the remains of the arena into a solid mess of stone. Having barely managed to miraculously dodge, he realizes with horror the full depth of the chasm between their forces. The only chance to survive is to activate the deadly Predator ability. But can even this dark technique defeat such a monster with a single blow? Any mistake will lead to irreversible consequences that can destroy the owner himself. The recoil from the superior energy hits immediately, bursting out along with the scarlet blood. Only after a while does the darkness of unconsciousness dissipate, giving way to the sterile silence of a hospital ward. A faithful comrade appears nearby, anxiously watching every movement. Overcoming the weakness in my exhausted body, I manage to slowly rise up in bed. And although the body still responds with pain, the spark of magic lights up again in the fingers, giving hope for a new battle. A barely perceptible pulse of force is concentrated at the very tip of the finger, causing the air around it to thicken. But as soon as you look away for a moment, the shadows of the past and the insane thirst for blood appear before your eyes again. Clenching his fist, Tae-young feels the rings on his fingers begin to fill with ancient magic. The sudden appearance of Yua-yeon in the ward immediately dispels the gloomy atmosphere. She only smiles warmly, realizing that he can no longer be kept within the hospital walls. And new challenges are not long in coming. The giant monster collapses under a barrage of crimson attacks. The ferocious Minotaur doesn't even have time to realize where this crushing blow came from. Scarlet flashes cut through the dark air, completely depriving the monster of the opportunity to dodge. In flight, Tae-hyung is like lightning, delivering one precise and deadly cut after another. The enraged monster tries to respond with a furious swing, filling the surrounding area with a wild roar. However, the hero can no longer be stopped. A scarlet rage flares in his eyes, and his blade thirsts for more blood. A powerful explosion of concentrated energy blinds everything around for a moment. A series of instant attacks leaves deep, burning wounds on the giant's body. Under the onslaught of incessant blows, the enemy's most durable weapons shatter into tiny fragments. The stunned monster watches helplessly as his last defense crumbles. A piercing cry of pain pierces the silence as crimson bolts sear through the giant's flesh. A mischievous grin lights up Tae-hyung's face as the shadow of a creepy dark giant looms behind him. The summoned ghost brings down its entire giant hand, directly on the enemy pinned to the ground. The earth shakes from inhuman power, destroying everything in its path, and the enemy finally loses his strength, throwing his head back in a deathly convulsive cry. Gathering the last of his will into a fist, Kim Tae-young puts all his rage into the decisive blow. His blade, engulfed in crimson flame, cuts through the flesh of the terrifying monster with crushing force. The colossal beast lets out a piercing cry, realizing that its centuries-long reign has come to an end. The young man's eyes glow with an unwavering determination to see this matter through to the very end. The demonic flesh begins to disintegrate, giving into the onslaught of primordial cleansing magic. A powerful explosion releases the accumulated energy, illuminating the battlefield with a blinding scarlet light. A massive pillar of pure force shoots upward, wiping the monster from the face of the earth forever. As the dust begins to settle, the wounded warriors stand frozen in silent stupor before the fallen titan. The faces of those present showed only the deepest shock from what they saw. No one can believe their eyes when they see the aftermath of this incredible battle. Fear and bewilderment are slowly replaced by a timid hope of salvation. And then, through the clouds of smoke, the silhouettes of those who accomplished the impossible begin to appear. Kim Tae-hyung, overcoming terrible fatigue, carefully supports his seriously wounded comrade. At this moment, the hearts of the observers stop, with the realization that their heroes have actually returned alive. The surrounding people explode with joyful cries, rushing to meet their saviors. And in the very heart of the conquered dungeon, a legendary treasury opens, full of untold riches. The main reward is an ancient artifact of unprecedented beauty, the mysterious Fountain of Power. News of Kim Tae-hyung's great feat instantly spread throughout the world, making his name a legend. But his faithful comrade, forced to recuperate in a hospital ward, does not at all share the general pathos. Meanwhile, those who are behind the scenes of this conspiracy are finally getting what they deserve by going to jail. But his faithful comrade, forced to recuperate in a hospital ward, does not at all share the general pathos. Meanwhile, those who are behind the scenes of this conspiracy are finally getting what they deserve by going to jail. Poor Lee Jong-jae has it tough, as health concerns in these parts take alarmingly exaggerated forms. However, Kim Tae-young himself is enjoying the well-deserved peace and quiet of a sunny day surrounded by his loved ones. His signature smile exudes the confidence of a man who has been through any trials. Even tough veterans like Go Tai-wook can't contain their emotions when they see their comrades triumph. But hospital staff are vigilant, ready to use the most radical treatment methods on any malingerer. Cameras continuously record every step, turning any event into a sensation. The reporters' lenses reflect the general excitement and thirst for big headlines. The assembled crowd held its breath in anticipation of the official announcement. The roar of voices increases as a key figure takes the podium. Hazard takes the floor, addressing reporters with his trademark blunt irony. Questions are pouring in from all sides, but the atmosphere is heating up to the limit. Hazard merely brushes off the persistent reporters, fueling the intrigue. The crowd of journalists freezes in disbelief, digesting the unexpected statement. Kim Tae-young slowly appears under the gaze of hundreds of cameras and astonished glances. His gaze reveals a hint of irony and a complete understanding of his own importance. Lim A-young and the rest of her colleagues hang on every word in shock, realizing the scale of what is happening. Word of his incredible achievements and title as a national-level hunter spread like wildfire. The energy of the new generation of leaders overwhelms the will of those around them, heralding a new era. Speaking to the press, a guild representative makes a loud official statement. Every word he says finds an immediate response from the assembled journalists. The live broadcast of this speech is broadcast across all channels in the country. Powerful figures watch every frame closely, sensing a growing threat. Even ordinary people in establishments cannot tear themselves away from their screens, anticipating changes. But what comes out of the speaker's mouth next leaves the audience speechless. The reporters' faces turn pale with surprise and growing shock, and the speaker just confidently holds the microphone, reveling in the effect he has produced. His eyes glow with a firm determination to see his plans through to the end. However, while the world watches the news, in the depths of dark halls, another fate is being decided. With tears in her eyes, the girl begs for mercy, clinging to her last hope. But the masked man towers over her, unwavering, like death itself. He slowly extends his hand, radiating an ominous magic. In her gaze, one can read only the primal horror of what is about to happen. The deceptively gentle touch on her chin lasts only a second, and the next moment, the darkness mercilessly tears her body apart. Thick, dark clots of energy instantly absorb the remains of her life. Behind the executioner's mask, there are no emotions visible, only a cold and empty look. Her subordinates, trembling with fear, are ready to carry out any order, just to avoid repeating her fate. After all, this man's cruelty knows no bounds, and his shadow already covers this entire world. Flames consume the ancient estate as masked figures confidently walk towards the inevitable. Heavy footsteps echo in the dimly lit corridor, heralding the arrival of an uninvited guest. The doors swing open with force, and Li Zhongjiaye freezes in surprise, meeting the gaze of the troublemaker. Lim Aeon opens the door in alarm, not believing her eyes and trying to comprehend the scale of what is happening. Kim Tae-young appears at the door, radiating a sinister yet alluring confidence. His gaze is piercing, causing everyone in the room to hold their breath in anticipation of the order. Having glanced around at the elite circle of those gathered, he nonchalantly takes his place at the common table. Go Tai-wook sits motionless, but the beads of sweat on his face reveal extreme tension. Lurking in the shadows is the dangerous Hazard, a name that invariably inspires fear in the 8th place national rankings. Yoan plays with her star, watching the tense atmosphere with a sly and teasing smile. Ricky Harley's leaned back in his chair, hiding his true strength behind a mask of indifference. A passage sealed in silence hides the figure of Kim Tae-hyung, whose presence weighs on everyone more than any wall. At the head of the table sits a man with an eye patch, whose authority here is unquestionable. The gesture of power draws everyone's attention to the central projection of a global threat. A panoramic shot of the headquarters captures the entire elite gathered in the face of impending disaster. Meanwhile, chaos engulfs the streets, unleashing terrifying monsters and an army of madmen. Cody Wood, with a manic grin, draws his blade, surrounded by a pulsating dark aura. The screen flashes to the triumph of a jubilant crowd, celebrating victory under Hazard's leadership. But this fragile joy is shattered into pieces by an iron grip that is ready to crush any hope. A flash of lightning cuts through the sky above the crowd, foreshadowing a storm that could sweep away all living things. While the crowd rejoices, celebrating a dubious victory over a captured enemy, behind the scenes of this triumph a completely different drama is playing out. After all, behind the glitter of gold there always lies a dark, unexplored abyss, about which this mysterious storyteller speaks. Lee Jung-jae watches closely, realizing that the true motives of their allies are hidden deep beneath the mask of friendliness. He remembers how the insidious Rosaria whispered her sinister promises to him, weaving poisonous lies into his mind. And yet now the rules of the game have changed, and a subtle, confident smile appears on his face. This look belongs to a man who is no longer going to be just a pawn in someone else's hands. Against the backdrop of a world map, the speaker reveals new, frightening details of the coming confrontation. The forces of darkness, led by the unstoppable Cody Wood, are already mobilizing their hidden reserves for a decisive blow. A heavy silence falls over the boardroom as those who truly rule this world from the shadows take the stage. The assembled leaders cannot hide their shock and alarm at the impending threat. The sudden tension literally physically shakes the room, causing everyone to brace for the worst. Lee Jung-jae feels cold sweat break out on his forehead as he realizes the scale of the impending disaster. Those around exchange nervous glances, realizing that there is no turning back. The fates of millions of lives are now being decided at this enormous table, and the price of the slightest mistake will be exorbitant. A sharp slam of the palms on the table instantly stops any arguments and makes everyone fall silent. The one-eyed leader towers over those present, radiating an aura of absolute power and unshakable confidence. His harsh statement echoes throughout the room, erasing any doubt about his intentions. Even the most cool-headed of those present are forced to admit that the situation is completely out of their control. The shocking truth makes the heroes' hearts beat faster in anticipation of an inevitable clash, and the leader's sinister grin only confirms they are on the brink of a war from which no one will emerge the same. The huge arena is buzzing with tension, gathering the best forces from all corners of the world. The air itself seems to thicken as legendary fighters take to the field one after another. Go Taiwook moves forward, maintaining a deadly composure and absolutely ready for battle. And the giants of this tournament only grin predatorily, sincerely anticipating the upcoming bloodshed. But while a grand show unfolds in the center of the arena, far from prying eyes, completely different passions are raging. Ordinary people watch the broadcast with bated breath, unaware of how close the danger is. And only the most ardent fans are ready to foam at the mouth to prove the greatness of their idol. Their blind and uncontrollable faith turns into a real fire, frightening even their relatives. However, this mad impulse instantly vanishes, leaving behind only a ringing silence. After all, in the shadow world everything is decided not by loud slogans but by weighty arguments. Behind the defenseless old people, the shadow of madness is already looming, ready to engulf them at any moment. And the peaceful city continues to sleep peacefully, completely oblivious to the approaching threat. And the fatal step, capable of crossing out this idyll, is heard unexpectedly quietly. Li Zhongjae instantly feels the atmosphere around him become unbearably heavy. All he can do is smile nervously, trying to hide the numbness that has overcome him. The mysterious guest strides through the crowd like a beautiful and deadly harbinger of chaos. Her enchanting yet dangerous gaze promises only destruction to anyone who stands in her way. The ancient forces awakened behind her make even warriors accustomed to risk hold their breath, but her graceful step is constant, and her true purpose is absolute and beyond doubt. For the real game is just beginning, and she alone will dictate the rules. Tensions at headquarters reach fever pitch when Li Zhongjae finds himself in a spotlight. In the dim light of tactical monitors, elite fighters froze, awaiting the final word. The guy barely manages to keep his cool as the others hurriedly leave the command post. His gaze falls upon the stern face of the commander, whose unyielding will is physically palpable. Everything inside him is clenching with growing anxiety, but it is too late to retreat. He takes a step forward, separating him from the cold glow of the operating table. The eyes of the organization's leader look with a silent, heavy pressure that can break anyone. The space between them is filled with air so dense that it is difficult to breathe. Li Zhongjae steels himself, ready to voice what will determine the outcome of the upcoming operation. However, a sudden shout breaks the fragile silence, causing everyone to turn around sharply. The commander tries to contain his emotions, but the situation is clearly getting out of control. The young man again freezes in front of the heady gaze, weighing each next movement. A strange, barely noticeable smile touches the corners of his lips, changing the entire atmosphere in the room. He passes by silently, slightly brushing his shoulder against Yoshikawa Sarara, who is standing nearby. His self-confident appearance betrays a man who is clearly planning something dangerous. And Yoshikawa Sarara follows him with a predatory gaze full of hidden excitement, anticipating a brawl. Meanwhile, he confidently crosses the crowded hall, attracting everyone's attention. Go Taiwook appears next to him, his cold face radiating iron discipline. Go Taiwook remains absolutely calm, ready to help at any moment. But her graceful step is constant, and her true purpose is absolute and beyond doubt. He strides straight into the epicenter of the raging whirlwind of power, without stopping for a moment. In this ringing silence before the storm, a determination is born that can crush any obstacle. And while the faithful Go Taiwook silently controls her every move, Rosaria prepares to reveal her true nature. Her predatory smile leaves no doubt the coming chaos will bring her only true pleasure.